Welcome to Mortification of Spin, a casual conversation about things that count, with Carl Trueman and Todd Pruitt, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. Let's join this week's conversation.
You are listening to Mortification of Spin. My name is Todd Pruitt. I am the pastor at Covenant Presbyterian Church in the great state of Virginia. And I'm joined, as always, by my friend Carl Trueman, who is a professor at Grove City College, currently on loan to Notre Dame. Carl, good to see you.
Good to see you, too.
One thing I am asked every once in a while is whether or not I've met anyone famous. And I can say this, that some years ago, this would have been in the late 90s. No. This would have been in the early 90s. I was with a group of college students in California, and we went to Disneyland one day, and we saw Tom Hanks walking around with his little son. Now, Tom Hanks at that point had already become famous. He'd done a couple of movies, and we followed him around Disneyland for about 30 minutes before deciding it would be really creepy for us to stop him while he's with his little son. So I didn't meet him, but I stalked Tom Hanks at Disneyland one time when he was much younger.
I'm pretty sure I saw a social media post where he said, I'm being followed by some creepy bald guy and his family around.
Fortunately, that was well before social media. Now, Carl, I'm saying this because I'm just setting you up because I know that you had a celebrity encounter recently that some of our Gen Z reader or listeners might not appreciate. But people my age definitely would appreciate. Go ahead and tell us now. Go ahead and brag about who you got to meet.
Was sitting in the departure lounge at LAX, and this guy walked past me, and I thought, that's Stuart Copeland of the Police, the great drummer of the Police. My wife said, go and ask him for an autograph. I said, I can't do that. I said, I'm not 100% sure. Well, as we passed through the point where you flash your boarding pass to the gate agent started to bow before him. And I was, okay, this is Stuart Copeland of the Police. Now, the nice twist, I was able to tell him that Message in a Bottle, it's mine and my son, one of my son's favorite tracks. When we got on the plane, my wife and I used Air Miles to upgrade. He's sitting right behind me.
Nice.
Now, some young guy gets on, has no idea who this is, throws his laptop into Stuart Copeland's lap and says, hey, bud, can you hold this for me?
No.
I said to that is not the way you address a rock god. It's Mr. Copeland, sir, and you keep your eyes looking down. You don't look directly at the face.
Exactly.
But the really annoying thing to my wife was this. Half an hour before we got on board, we'd upgraded using Air Miles, and we hadn't been able to get seats together. Half an hour before, I checked, and there were 2 seats together, so I put us together, little knowing that I was moving her from sitting next to Stuart Copeland for the whole flight to sitting next to me. I mean, hey.
See, you could have just changed seats with your wife, and you could have sat next to Stuart Copeland and bothered him the entire flight.
I mean, she said to me, I wanted to sit by a rock star. I said, honey, you are sitting by a rock star.
I mean, you could have traded seats with her, sat next to Stuart Copeland, and then just kind of sang to him the whole time.
Yeah. One thing I did.
And he could kind of drum on his lap or something like that.
As he got off the plane,
loved that.
He put a COVID mask on as he got off the plane. But this was a way, I think, of making sure that people like me didn't bug him as he walked through Chicago airport.
Yeah. You could have told him, you could have said, I like Sting a lot better than I like you. That could have led to something interesting as well.
I was thinking, this man's been in fistfights with Sting. How cool is that? We don't approve of fistfights on this program, by and large, but Sting and Stuart Copeland having a fistfight backstage, that's a scene to conjure.
That would be wonderful. Yeah, we'd love that.
Yeah. So what have you got for us today, Todd?
Well, Carl, I sent out a plea on Facebook
Never a good idea. Never a good idea.
But I have a very carefully curated a group of Facebook friends, so they're only the best, the cream of the crop, and as you're going to see in just a moment. And I asked, hey, what kind of listener questions do we have for an episode of Mortification of Spin? And I got some great feedback, and just to show you the quality of listeners that we have. One listener who will remain anonymous, but
that's never
his
a good
name
sign.
But no, I know who it is. But I'll keep his anonymity. Anyway, his name is Derek Bright. He wanted to know why cargo shorts should be banned, because he actually thinks that cargo shorts are acceptable apparel for men. And then the other thing he wanted to know is, when can we specifically expect Carl to become Roman Catholic?
Well, as to the first, if I don't have the categories to answer that question. If it isn't obvious why cargo shorts should be banned, nothing I can do can persuade you otherwise. And secondly, when will Carl become Roman Catholic? I think the day that it becomes compulsory in Presbyterianism to wear cargo shorts, I'm gone. Okay. I'm gone at that point, man.
I like it. I see what I'm talking about my friends. These guys are sharp. Now one, and there's a whole variety here. So we're gonna be swinging all over the place in terms of topics here. Here's an interesting one, and I really do think this is an interesting one, because we've had discussions about this at our church, and we actually have some plans. But one brother wants to know, I'd like to hear a discussion about the criteria to consider in matters of church security measures during Lord's Day worship. There have been incidents where violence has occurred at churches. Granted, considering the number of churches there are, it's quite rare. Nevertheless, over the last couple of years, there have been shootings at churches, at Christian schools. And I know that churches are, more than any time I can remember, thinking about security measures. Now, I'm in the Shenandoah Valley, and there's a very strong Anabaptist kind of culture here. And so if you know anything about, Mennonite culture, that kind of degree of Anabaptism, then you know that there's a strong emphasis placed on pacifism. And so this debate is actually kind of hot here in the Shenandoah Valley, because we have folks that say you shouldn't have any security measures, because if you have a security measure, that means you're going to be resisting an evildoer, which we're not supposed to do. That's kind of the pacifist mindset. Others, have security teams. We have a security team. We have folks that, or there are churches that have folks that have concealed carry licenses, that kind of thing. Carl, how do you think we ought to think about security measures in our churches?
Yeah. Well, first of all, on the it's a much bigger debate about resisting an evildoer. Right. And I'm going to assume at this point that protecting the innocent in a defensive way is a perfectly legitimate thing for Christians to do. There is a debate to be had about resisting an evildoer, but I think that takes us off at a bit of a tangent at this point. Yep. Secondly, I've heard we have people who are packing in our congregation. Yeah. Much, if not all, of the research would indicate that amateur people packing weapons are more problems. They're more problematic. They're more part of the problem than part of the solution when it comes to gunplay in a difficult situation. So I would say, I personally think it's very legitimate to have armed security, hidden armed security there, but it should really be people with proper training. Yep. When I was a pastor in Philadelphia, we had a young guy, and we had somebody struggling with paranoid schizophrenia coming to the congregation at one point, who was armed. And I spoke to one of the young men. This was many years ago. One of the young men, and he was trained in the Coast Guard, so he knew something about weapons and sort of. And I felt comfortable asking him to keep an eye on this particular person.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be comfortable asking, the the school, the soccer mum who happens to pack a Smith and Wesson in her handbag. No, I don't think you can. You can't stop people doing that. They have a right
Right.
to do that. But I
Right.
don't think you should take the view, well, everybody in my church has a gun, so they're safe. No, if everybody in your church has a gun, but is clueless about combat, you're going to have a
Right.
bloodbath when this thing goes down.
Yep.
So I think if you're going to have church security, if you haven't got the people in your congregation with military or police training, you probably need to think about hiring a proper security firm.
Yeah.
I preached years ago at a church in Brazil in an area where there's a lot of violence. And I remember the church actually had, men obviously with guns standing outside the church on a Sunday. And it struck me as, given the context, quite a prudent thing to do.
Yeah. I remember this has been probably 7 or 8 years ago. The churches in our area got a warning from a government institution that they were getting some chatter about possible assaults on churches in our area on Christmas Eve or Christmas. And that year, Christmas was falling on a Sunday. And it was serious enough that this agency reached out to churches. And it wasn't long after this, actually, that a number of young men from a particular part of the world were arrested right here in our area for making plans to attack churches. But that Christmas Eve service and that Christmas Day service, there was a particular elder who had skills who sat next to me at the Christmas Eve service and the Christmas service. And there were a couple of other men who have expertise in handling firearms, who had their eyes open and just to be aware of what was going on, and that was the right thing to do. Our church members, our brothers and sisters in Christ in the household of God, are the first layer of our responsibility, and we ought to take reasonable measures to secure their safety. I agree with you that having, just anybody who got a gun last week or last month show up armed is probably not going to be helpful in case there is an incident.
You certainly shouldn't rely on that.
Exactly.
You need people
but to
who know
have
what they're
people
doing.
who have real training and real expertise in handling a firearm, and they know how, and they can keep their calm, and they can be wise and be safe, then that's, I think it's perfectly legitimate for a church to do that. You don't have to, but I would encourage any church to have really thought about, if an incident occurs, how do we protect our kids? How do we protect the members of our church? What's the way that we're going to best try to protect our members? So that's, I hope that every church has thought about that in case the worst happens. Okay, moving on. This one hit me as well. A particular guy is asking for some thoughts on compassion fatigue or burnout for those that are in ministry. For those who might not be aware of that term, compassion fatigue, I think it kind of explains itself. It's where you deal with so many crises and so many difficult issues and heartbreaking issues in people's lives that it can get to a point where you just run out of compassion. You just find yourself unable at some point or a particular day to feel the kind of compassion that you would normally feel in a particular kind of case, and that's a real thing. I mean, any pastor who's doing his work is going to deal with a lot of heartbreaking issues, and for the church I serve, we're large enough that every week, myself and the other elders and the deacons, we're dealing with heartbreaking issues, difficult issues that require action, but along with that, compassion as well. And Carl, what would you say to a pastor who says, man, I have had such a year. I don't know if I can feel compassion at this point. I mean, I am wrung out. What would you want to say to
Yeah,
that?
I think that's very legitimate, and sometimes, of course, these things arise from things happening in the pastor's own life. If there's an illness in the
Mhm.
family, or he's under peculiar pressure in a particular area, we all have a limited amount of emotional energy we can expend on other people. I would say in that sort of context, the key is often the elders,
Yep.
being able to share the load, being able to speak honestly with your elders about
Mhm.
how you're handling things. I always remember the book. I can't remember the title of the book, but there was a book by Christopher Ashe on pastoral burnout. And Christopher Ashe,
Yes.
I think himself, has struggled badly with these
Mhm.
things over time. And he was making the point that, you don't know you're going to burn out until you do. You could be
Right.
perfectly well one day and unable to get out of bed the following.
Yeah.
So I would say that you need the kind of culture where you feel supported before you burn out.
Mhm.
Make sure that you and your elders have a good relationship, and you're able to share these things with them. And of course, if you're married, you can share certain things with your wife as well
Yeah.
to get support there.
Yeah.
Um, Being constant in prayer. Constant. Well, one of the things I missed when I was pastoring was not sitting under the word.
Mhm.
I think a lot of pastors, it's not just compassion fatigue, it's you're not under the word, and that takes away one of the things that often feeds, energizes, strengthens. I hate to use the term ordinary Christian because it sounds like I'm setting up a hierarchy, but Christians who are not preaching the word every week
Right.
have the benefit of sitting under the word every
Right.
week, which the pastor does not have. So the pastor might want to find ways of bringing himself under the word and being fed in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a few things I do because I do feel this at times. And it feels kind of shameful as a pastor when you're sitting in a meeting and somebody shares an issue that has just come up either in their life or in the life of a church member, and it's a serious issue, and it is a heartbreaker, and you have those occasions, and I know what this is like to sit there and go, that didn't move. That didn't move me at all. I am so exhausted. I can't care about that right now, and it's very shameful.
Mm.
Pastor feels very bad when he feels that way because he knows he doesn't want to feel that way. But a couple of things that you said stood out, and these are some things that I do to kind of help me when I'm struggling that way, is prayer and the word. And what I mean by that is, if just this year I've worked on expanding in terms of time wise, expanding my time of morning prayer. Where I've added a few things. I always have a really good devotional book, like something by J.C. Ryle or something like that, that'll give me one page of just a great insight from Scripture. And then taking time to pray. If you're not doing that as a pastor, you're not helping yourself. You're hurting yourself. And so, I mean, I've just realized over this past year that I needed more time doing that, and so I dedicate more of my morning time to do that. And then the other thing is I don't just try, I do. I listen to preaching every week. And that's not the same thing as sitting in a worship service, under the live preaching of the word. But, we have to do it. We can't do it. We can't do. And a pastor rarely gets the chance to actually sit under the live preaching of the word. But I still gain a lot from a handful of really good preachers that are just kind of on an almost weekly rotation that I listen to. And it's always good for me. There's something that I gain from those sermons that the Lord uses to sanctify me in some way, correct me in some way. And so I would encourage guys to do that. Make sure that you're allowing the word to really soak in, and make sure you're getting time in prayer before the Lord, and tell your elders about that. Talk to them about that, because it's a real issue, and you don't want it to lead you to burnout. You don't want to get to the point where you're having to fake it every day.
Yeah. And I would add as well the importance of friends.
Yeah.
Over the years, I found it good to have friends who are not in my congregation, pastors who are not in my congregation, are not in my denomination, because it means when we talk, we don't just sit and talk about the political problems of the congregation or the denomination. We're actually able to talk about other things and be an encouragement to each other. So, we live in an era where friendship is very cheap. Anybody online you've connected with is a friend. I would say cultivate some really good friends that you can talk to and rely on and trust to, that when you unburden yourself, they'll give you good advice.
Yep. Okay, now one totally out of left field, but it's the question is offered sincerely, and I think justifiably so, given some of the things that have been hitting the news in the last 2 weeks. This is actually asked on this list at least twice. Okay, here you go. If alien life were to be discovered on other planets, how would that affect our faith, or how should that affect our faith, if at all? If any of our listeners aren't aware, and we're seeing more of this over the last several years, is people in government saying, "Hey, listen, the government has a lot more evidence about extraterrestrial life than they're letting on." You have serious people now saying that, and just in the last 2 weeks, this has been a mainstream news outlet saying, "Look, there's potential of the government releasing all of its confidential files, and some people are within the government are saying there's evidence of extraterrestrial life." Now, color me skeptical to a very high degree at this point about any of that. However,
which is unusual for you, Todd. You normally, conspiracy theory adjacent is how I think of you.
I think my guess is that what the government has, I'm sure the government has some really peculiar things, because peculiar things do happen, particularly when you're talking about several nations in the world that have all kinds of things flying up in the sky. But I am asked from time to time, hypothetically, if it was discovered that there was intelligent, sentient life on other planets, what does that do to our faith? And of course, part of the question there is, intelligent life as in a dolphin, or soulish life like we know as humans? That's a big question there. That's a huge distinction. Let me ask you this. Do you think that the Bible rules out the possibility of soulish life outside of this planet?
I think the Bible rules out the possibility of creatures made in the image of God outside of the human race. Now, whether there are other planets with humans on them, I don't know. I severely doubt it.
Right.
But I would say, the discovery of alien life, in some ways, it would be neither here nor there to me theologically, because the image of God. And I would also say, we're going to be facing questions like that, even if we don't discover alien life. What if you make a human being from skin cells?
There you go.
What if you make something that's kind of like a human being from skin cells, but cleverer and stronger? Right. I think there are all kinds of questions coming our way that could challenge, our faith, re the exceptionalism of human beings made in the normal way that don't require life on other planets. But I would say the alien question might even be easier than the question of, well, what happens if we make a creature from human skin cells and it shares 99.9% of its DNA with those anthropological questions connecting to soteriology are pressing in on us in a disturbing way. So I do remember as a kid, my dad and I, 3 or 4 nights in a row, we'd walk the dog every night. We saw some very strange things in the sky. And they were there 3 or 4 nights in a row. And we rarely talked about it. But, to this day, I can't explain what I saw. And I would say my best guess is it was some secret military research being tested. I live not far from various RAF air bases that were basically full of Americans. They had one RAF guy on staff. So, it would not surprise me if we discover that a whole host of secret and interesting things are known and have been done. I personally would be surprised if they're extraterrestrial.
Yeah.
It seems to me that maybe some military research that we don't know about will be a more plausible explanation.
Yeah, the physics of it seems to rule it out. In fact, a lot of scientists say that sort of space travel is just impossible,
right?
In terms of physics, you have to transcend even the speed of light.
Yeah, and it would be hard for it to remain. Given how incompetent our government, I mean, this is the death blow to conspiracies. Given how incompetent our governments are, how would they keep it secret for this long?
Yeah. For me, that's kind of the final nail in the coffin for this thing, that we're hiding these things because we just would have never been able to keep those things secret. So we just would not have been able to do it.
Yeah. I have to ask you at this point, by the way, what do you make of the Jeffrey Epstein suicide note?
Jeffrey Epstein did not kill himself. All right. And aliens with the aid of Hillary Clinton did it. But I will throw out one more thought. I'll throw out one more thought on that, because sometimes people will say, but the universe is so massive, and Earth, to use Carl Sagan's term, is just this pale blue dot. And I addressed this when I was preaching through Genesis during the creation account. I addressed that head on, and I just said, God. It makes sense that God would not create us in such a way that we would be tempted to think that we're the center of the universe. Just like with Adam and Eve, he places his image upon, he creates them in his image, makes them his co-regents on earth, puts them in charge of expanding the temple, as it were, across the face of the earth. But then is careful to give them a law to live under, lest they think that they're God. And in the same way, I think the quote unquote smallness of the earth, way out here in the expanse of the universe, is, nobody stands before the Grand Canyon and contemplates their own greatness. If they're sane, they don't. Yeah. And in the same way, when we think about the issue of our smallness in the vastness of the universe, I think that's a way for God to prompt us, to remind us what He is like versus what we are like. I don't think that should prompt us to think, therefore there has to be ETs on other planets. I think that our relative smallness is to prompt us along with other things, towards doxology, and wonder and awe of God. The universe is for Him. The universe isn't for me. So we'll just throw that out. And Epstein didn't kill himself. So those are the two things I want people to walk away from. Is that the government is not holding aliens, and Epstein didn't kill himself. So there you go.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
nice.
Good.
I've been wanting to ask you that since that news story broke earlier this week. So.
Oh, yeah. Happy I could help. Glad we got to bless our listeners. Well, there were more questions we didn't get to because we spent so much time on the alien thing, but there you go. I think we've settled it now. Yeah,
well, all that remains, I guess, is for me to thank those who provided questions, except the man with the cargo pants. I mean, this is the 21st century. I shouldn't have to answer a question like that. Good grief. So
it's really difficult.
To all our listeners, cargo pants, no, never, not, definitely 9. All that remains is for me to thank Todd Pruitt for gathering these questions and for his insights into the Jeffrey Epstein scandal, as well as his uncharacteristic skepticism about the government cover-up of aliens. That encourages me. I've had an effect on you in the decades of
that's exactly what it is.
And if you're listening, please visit our website, mortificationofspin.org. And if while you're there you feel led to make a donation, please do so. We are a listener-supported podcast. I'm not sure there's going to be a giveaway this week, but if there is, please put in for it. Maybe
because you never know.
So.
Could be a surprise. Might give away some swag.
Yeah. And, next time, please join us again. Well, I'll be asking Todd if he thinks that Paul McCartney really was assassinated in the late 1960s. Until then,
he's an imposter.
We look forward to being with you next time.
Thanks for listening to Mortification of Spin, a podcast of the Alliance of Confessing Evangelicals. For more on topics like this, visit mortificationofspin.org, where you can find other articles by Carl and Todd, browse the archive of past episodes, and make a donation. We'll talk to you next time on Mortification of Spin.